Congress certifies the 2020 election after a riot spilled into the Capitol building. STSU lecturer and Fox 5 legal analyst Wendy Patrick joins us live. Wendy, good morning.
Good morning, Raul. What a morning.
What a morning. What a day yesterday. Where to start? Some lawmakers have now accused the president of inciting the riot that happened yesterday. Could he face legal recourse? That's been the conversation.
He could face recourse in the court of public opinion, probably not in a court of law. The president has never directly incited violence, and I know the word directly, what does that mean? Our president is in favor of rallies, not riots. The problem that basically everybody at the Capitol faced yesterday is people attending rallies in riot gear, i.e. there were agitators among the largely peaceful crowds in the same fashion that we saw play out last summer, although distinctively different in terms of what the issues were. But the bottom line is, this wasn't a flash mob. This was an organized, publicized, well-publicized event, in fact, that everybody expected. What they didn't expect, and what the president certainly didn't advise and didn't incite, was what ended up happening at the Capitol. We are just now, Raul, getting some footage in that draws into question who might have been the first one that breached, whether they were actually Trump supporters, whether they were members of other groups. So this is where law enforcement and good investigation will really give us some more answers as to what in the world happened when this group got to the Capitol, where they were supposed to simply protest peacefully.
How were so many agitators able to penetrate the Capitol? I think the issue of safety and the Capitol Police, I mean, despite what group was doing what, how was that able to happen? A joint session of Congress was happening inside at the time.
It's the same question we've asked over the years where somebody jumps the wall to the White House, or remember somebody actually got to the front door a couple of years ago. We wonder what happened, whether there's an incident like this. You can't say they were overwhelmed because everybody knew they were coming. But if you look at some of the footage that we're just now seeing today about exactly how that breach occurred, remember the Capitol is filled with windows and doors. What we're probably going to see more of when they're ready to give a public statement once they've gathered the evidence will probably be very helpful in planning for the future, not just for January 20th. All eyes are going to be on security on the 20th. But also in the future with these large venues, with public buildings where important business is taking place. I mean, certifying the election for the President of the United States. And it will no doubt lead to some review of current policies and some procedures and maybe some new ideas for the future. But we don't ever really want to assume until we get the information to let us know how did this happen and how can we prevent it from happening again.
Let's talk about the charges that people who stormed the Capitol building could face. I think we're up to 68 arrests. More than likely, more are coming. The FBI is putting out a call for people to basically tell them who a lot of these folks were. What are the charges they're looking at now?
Well, they could be looking at everything from low-level trespassing to high-level assault with a deadly weapon. They could be looking at possession of explosives to battery. There are so many different things that went on in the Capitol. Remember, now we're finding that there actually were bombs. There were weapons. Remember when they first approached, all they saw is Trump flags, and it wasn't the kind of thing where they immediately would respond with deadly force, would be probably what they would tell you, but the charges could be many. As far as who is culpable, I mean, the Capitol is filled with cameras. Yes, there's a call out for tips, but there will be people reviewing that footage that will be able to then come up with ideas as to who was where and who can they charge. We see this every time something like this happens on a mass scale. It takes a while to identify the perpetrators, but then comes the slew of arrests. Right after this, we say, well, why aren't more people in jail? Well, slowly but surely, law enforcement will do their jobs as the rest of us are patient. They'll figure out who was responsible, and then they'll bring those perpetrators to justice.
And it's not like they were trying to hide their identity. The guy who was sitting in Nancy Pelosi's chair, they've already identified him. He posted something and did an interview, gave his name. And the guy in those horns and the fur and that getup, they already identified him as well. They weren't hiding who they were.
Half of these people are in it for the notoriety, hence the selfies and the immediate posting on social media. So those folks are not going to be hard to identify. Others we will need to identify, and especially those that were armed. And so we are going to have some upcoming investigation. Yeah. But that tip line is great too, Raul, that you mentioned. There are always ways, if you know something, you can share that knowledge with authorities.
So this morning, a GOP House representative from Illinois, Adam Kinzinger, who's been somewhat outspoken the last couple of months, a Republican again, he joined the Democrats calling to invoke the 25th Amendment. He released that video on Twitter. that process with 13 days left seems unlikely, but the fact that there's a call for it is kind of jarring.
Raul, your instincts are right on the money. And 13 days is certainly not the kind of time frame we would expect to be working with any punitive action. This seems to be more emotional reaction than procedural probability. Not to mention that it's almost academic in the way that they would think about involuntarily invoking the 25th Amendment. Remember, that's about fitness for office. That's about somebody, presidents when they're undergoing surgeries or times that they're literally incapacitated or unconscious, the VP has to step in. Plus, the vice president has to be on board with such a move. Mike Pence would never sign on to this.
Even after yesterday?
Even after yesterday, because of what the 25th Amendment is designed for. It's not designed for when you're upset at the president's rhetoric or their actions or their behavior. It's about fitness for office. Remember, this is not the first time during the last 4 years this has been discussed with reference to the president. It was briefly discussed once he had COVID, but even before then,
sure,
when people were unhappy with his performance. So it's just not practical, it's not feasible, and it's not going to happen. I understand people are angry,
sure,
and they're talking about it, but it's going to be just talk.
You mentioned it's just talk, it's more symbolic, but there has been talk that whether or not there's another impeachment in the next 2 weeks of the president, because some rules state that if you impeach again, and I'm trying to clarify this, could it be a strategic move to prevent him from running from office again in 2024? Because if that happens, he's banned from running again.
Or for political office. That's what
correct,
people are talking about. Now, there isn't enough time for that either. I mean, you'd have to gavel everyone back into Congress. Of course, the president gets his say. There aren't enough days left between now and the inauguration. We're 13 days out, so that's not going to happen. The fact that these are being discussed, I like your term symbolic, and I would agree that that's exactly the term to describe the anger, the heartfelt sympathy. I mean, a San Diegan was killed at the Capitol. Our prayers go out to her family today. So everybody's upset, everybody's angry. There's bipartisan outrage. But like the vice president said early this morning, let's get back to work. We're going to get everything back on track and move forward. Instead of responding emotionally, we're going to respond procedurally for a peaceful transition of power. Ironically, I'm quoting the president this morning in saying that.
Wendy Patrick, an historic day yesterday. We thank you so much, as always, for the insight.
Thanks, Raul.